And on that note, I would welcome you. But first of all, there's a gentleman who has been at the fore of economic policy, planning, and development in this country, Honorable Sir Tekpe. I describe him as one of the finest gentlemen that I know. We've encountered each other on just a few occasions. Honorable Sir Tekpe was here, I believe, around 6:20 a.m. Yes. The cleaners hadn't even started work. He caught them cleaning. And I was here to meet him. For me, I keep on saying that all of running a good media business, which may apply, those of you who are economists and others will share your own. I don't understand that side of it that much. Is running a system that is based on time and ideas. You may have a brilliant idea, but the time that you take it to market may not be relevant. So if we are going to go anywhere as a good people, as we are aiming to reset this national economy, then we have to go back to the fundamentals of time, ideas, and how to manage that pairing of inventory. Because if we do not do that, and we keep going at the rate that we continue to do, then the rest of the world will leave us behind. You may have a bright idea, as I keep saying, but by the time you take it to the people, you take it to the market, you may be a bit too late. So Honorable Sir Tekpe, Presidential Advisor, I thank you for making time to join this discussion. Also, we have Abeku Jan Kwanzaa, one of our good partners and associates, who has supported us over the years. He's a tax partner at PwC Ghana. Abeku, I thank you for dedicating this time to us. Thirdly, a gentleman I only met this morning, Mr. JC from the Bank of Ghana, is a director at the Governor's Department. All of us have been witnessing, as Winston was alluding to, a certain impressive movement on our currency. And I was telling Mr. JC from the BOG that for those of us at the Graphic Communications Group, unlike our enabler Ecobank, who see money every day, we bring in paper, we bring in inks, we bring in plates to produce that newspaper and distribute around this country daily. And the cost of that paper, if you look at the exchange rates that we sit with and the taxes that we are saddled by, you will be amazed. You would keep asking, how are these people still at play? I bring in $100,000 worth of paper, which is paper that I can use within 6 weeks, tops 8 weeks, if I'm really pushing the press. My taxes on that paper alone is $41,000. I bring in inks, printing plates to produce that paper that you see every day. It's around another $31,000 on a certain value of $100,000. So it will tell you what it is that we go through every day. So at the cold face of Ghana's economy, we're experiencing it directly, whatever the issues are, whatever the challenges are. We are just not journalists and creative people, media strategists and others. We deal in this economy as well, and we are participants. So whatever movements that happen positively, we appreciate it. So I was commending the BOG, Uncle Seth and others who are enabling some of these developments quite highly. I see a good friend of mine, Mr. Dake. I see Professor Korte. I see Professor Chumesi Barfos coming to the back. Some of you I know by face, some names I miss. But I'm really thankful that you've made time to come join us this morning. I believe as we go along, we'll get into introducing people and engaging better on this discourse. But for us, one of the key conversations which I've alluded to earlier is the value of partnerships. Graphic is not a subvented company. It's a state-owned entity, but it's not a subvented company like some of my media partners in the state portfolio are. So I have to pay all the people that I assemble to go and curate and publish news every day myself. I have to put a fleet of vehicles on the road going around the 16 regions of this country daily. Somebody would ask, how do you manage that? It's the value of partnerships such as Ecobank has enabled us with that allows us to do what we do. But we are indeed very committed to this nation, and will continue to push this agenda to ensure that we bring critical conversation points to the fore. It is meet, therefore, that this morning's conversation does not become a point of who said this and didn't do this and who did what and didn't and all of that. I would hope that we filter out the noise. We've got people who understand, who've got experience, who've done it, who will know what to do at every stage. Let's encourage them, let's challenge them as well to deliver what it is that we said we will do for this country. And this is the first of this daily graphic Ecobank Economic Forum that we'll be hosting. And we hope that we'll be seeing a lot more of you, and the discourse would get better as we progress, so that this nation and this community does not become a body of individuals, but a sovereign state with a national interest that we all pursue at a collective level. And when we construct this well, we'll be better for. I see the editor daily graphic, and the editor graphic has walked in. Editor, on your behalf, I welcome the team that is gathered in here, plus the guests who are going to participate in this economic forum. We are trusting that we would get out of here well enabled by policy discourse that duty bearers would take note of and make possible. To our partners, multimedia, I believe we are live on Joy 99.7 FM. I'm actually an ex-officio of that company, so I used to run multi-TV. So they owe me favors, even though they don't give me any. I thank you for making it possible for us to be heard live. And to the graphic digital team who are enabling our digital audience around the world. We hope that you would also make contributions into this discourse so we frame a direction for this land that will make us all a better people. I thank you.
Please, you can do better. A round of applause for him. This is a rich conversation with all the collaboration to make this program a success. We say thank you to all the partners, and we are hoping that before the end of today's conversation, a lot of issues may have been brought to light, and a lot of issues and solutions may have been provided to ensure we have a sustainable economic growth. Just this morning, we got information by a report from the ongoing AFDB meeting in Abidjan. The AFDB is projecting Ghana's growth to hit 4.5% by the end of 2025. And they are saying this is going to be supported by our oil and mining sector. And that is the foundation, but we'll delve deeper conversely on that particular analysis, because Mr. Atoforsen, our finance minister, says Ghana's growth rate in 2025 is will hit 4.0% in 2025. This goes in line with IMF's projection. I'm sure Professor Peter Korte and his team will surely also, I've also given out projections because I always tell my colleagues in the media and stuff that anytime Prof. Korte speaks in terms of economic growth, his projections always comes to pass. So they should really, yes, he's a professor. I always tell them that for years, and he's been consistent with that. And that boils down to the fact that research should not be made as a basis for politics. We should make sure that we respect research in the works of professors and key institutions who are always mandated, who have the expertise to provide policy direction. So it is always advisable not to play politics with policies. And by that, we can build a very formidable nation. A round of applause for Mr. Ato Afo again. Wonderful. Now we move to a very important conversation. And already the central bank has been doing wonders. You ask industry players, they keep asking Winston, would the CD slow down? Would the force slow down? And I keep telling them, whatever wonders the central bank is working, let the wonders keep going on. However, many are also not happy by the rate of fall. Irrespective, when it was going high, we were still not happy. You can't please everybody at the same time. However, I just want to introduce one very key person at the Bank of Ghana. He has been with the Bank of Ghana for over 30 years. He's a seasoned banker with over 30 years experience at the Bank of Ghana. His areas of expertise include banking supervision, internal auditing, financial reporting, and risk management. Through his career, Mr. Jesse has worked in various departments within the Bank of Ghana, including the internal audit, finance, and banking supervision. He currently serves as the head of banking supervision department, a position he has held for the past 7 years. In this role, he oversees the supervision of banks, savings and loan companies, and I've met him in several savings and loans platforms. And if you hear the extent, the depth of knowledge and expertise that he gives in terms of policy and how to restructure the sector, you will be amazed. This morning, we are privileged to have with us Mr. Osei Jesse, the Director of Banking Supervision at the Bank of Ghana, to give us, he's a guest speaker for this momentous occasion, which is the maiden edition of the Daily Graphic Ecobank Economic Forum. Please, with a round of applause, let us welcome Mr. Osei Jesse.
Before I start, just a little point of correction. I have moved on, and Banking Supervision Department is being managed by Mr. Ismail Adam. I'm in the Governance Department now, so just a little correction. Distinguished panelists, guests, colleagues, and more importantly, let me recognize the presence of Honorable Seth Tekpe, my lecturer, my teacher, and also Professor Korte. I worked with Professor Korte when he was, and he's still in one of the banks, so I know him very well, a man of he's a very intelligent man. I also want to recognize the presence of the CEO of Graphic Communication Group, and also all the senior members here. Good morning. I bring you greetings from Dr. Esiama, the Governor of the Bank of Ghana, Dr. Zachary Mumuni, and Madam Matilda Asante-Siedu, and all the staff of Bank of Ghana. The management team would have loved to be part of this engagement, but for some other equally important assignment outside the country, and they send their apologies, please. Yeah. It is an honor to be invited as a key speaker at this inaugural Daily Graphic Ecobank Economic Forum. So, I want to start by sincerely thanking Ecobank and the Graphic Communications Group Limited for leading the efforts to establish this platform for candid, non-partisan discussions about Ghana's economy. The discussions today will broadly focus on deconstructing and reconstructing the economy of Ghana. which fits the present circumstances when the economy is gradually recovering from years of cyclical crisis and structural challenges. Our task here is very easy and simple, and it is to ask the hard questions, propose practical solutions, and co-create a roadmap for Ghana's sustainable economic transformation. The collective responsibility across public, private, and civil society actors precisely sums the objective of this forum. Ladies and gentlemen, in the recent past, Ghana grappled with macroeconomic imbalances and unsustainable debt levels, which ultimately led to the signing of a 3-year IMF ECF program in 2022. Among others, the IMF program provided a credible anchor for government to undertake policy adjustments and comprehensive reforms to restore macroeconomic stability and debt sustainability, while laying the foundation for higher and more inclusive growth. Following the IMF program, a recovery process started and progressed steadily throughout 2023 and 2024, but challenges remained. The Ghanaian economy still exhibited some fiscal pressures, and there are high-level inflation and currency depreciation. At the start of 2025, however, the economic rebound has intensified, and the macro indicators are gradually heading in the right direction. What are these indicators? 1, the cedi has rebounded strongly, appreciating more than 20% over the 5 years month of the year, making a sharp turnaround from the 19.2% depreciation recorded in 2024. 2, headline inflation has moderated to 21.2% in April 2025 from 23.8% in December 2024 on the back of tight monetary policy, currency stability, and improving supply side conditions. 3, the external sector has improved significantly with a large current account surplus in the first quarter of 2025, supported by strong gold and cocoa performance. And I'm sure you know that gold and cocoa are the drivers of our revenues. 4, at the end of April 2025, gross international reserves stood at $10 billion, a record high, and was equivalent to 4.7 months of import cover, providing strong buffers for external shocks. 5, Ghana recorded real GDP growth of 5.7% in 2024, and this exceeded expectations. The strong growth is expected to continue with a projected GDP growth of 4% in 2025. On top of all these, the country has secured a staff-level agreement with the IMF under the 4th review of the ECF program, signaling commitment to continued reforms. In addition, Ghana's credit rating was recently upgraded by S&P from selective default to 3Cs+, based on the recent macroeconomic gains and continued progress in the external debt restructuring process. There's also renewed engagement from investors and the international markets, which indicates a clear vote of confidence in recent Ghana's policy direction. These developments reflect the start of an institutionalized policy reset and serves as the basis to build a more resilient, inclusive, and opportunity-rich Ghana. But there are risks. What are some of these risks? These risks include the ongoing geo-economic tensions and volatility in commodity prices. Any slippage could easily derail the hard-won gains. That is why the Bank of Ghana remains focused on prudent monetary policy formulation and strong collaboration with fiscal authorities to ensure policy coordination. Distinguished participants, one of the strongest, powerful tools deployed in the quest to rebuild Ghana's economy is monetary policy. At the just ended May 2025 meetings, the bank's Monetary Policy Committee took a unanimous decision to maintain the monetary policy at 28%. This was a deliberate and data-informed decision aimed at consolidating the disinflation gains achieved since the beginning of the year. Although inflation has eased to 21.2%, the level is high relative to the medium-term targets. Hence, the need to maintain the tight stance to fully re-anchor expectations and drive inflation further down. Beyond the policy rates, the bank also took an additional measure to amend the dynamic cash reserve ratio for all banks to maintain CRR in their respective currencies. What this means is that foreign currency reserves for domestic currency deposits foreign currency reserves for foreign currency deposits. Let me take it again. Foreign currency reserves for foreign currency deposits. Then domestic currency reserves for domestic currency deposits. Other structural reforms are underway to pave way for greater flexibility in liquidity management, to deepen the financial market and enhance the effectiveness of monetary transmission across the economy. The bank is fully aware that public trust in economic management is hard-won, doesn't come cheap, and can easily be lost. Therefore, the bank remains firmly committed to transparency and data-driven decision-making processes to achieve the mandate of price stability and financial stability, and rebuild public confidence in the process. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past few years, Ghana has implemented far-reaching regulatory and supervisory reforms in the financial sector to ensure stability and inclusiveness. What have you seen? The banking system is stronger and better capitalized. As of April 2025, the CAR, the capital adequacy ratio, was 15.8%, sorry. And what is the regulatory minimum? The regulatory minimum is 10%, but that's at the end of April, we were around 15.8%, 5.8% above the regulatory minimum. Liquidity positions and profitability levels have improved, although asset quality remains a concern. The non-performing loans ratio remains elevated at 23.6%. But even with this, if you adjust for the provisions that have been made for the asset in the loan non-performing category, the NPE ratio declines from the 23.6% to 9%. So what this means is that banks are taking proactive steps to address legacy issues associated with their loan portfolios. The Bank of Ghana continues to exercise vigilant supervision, particularly over undercapitalized institutions. And what is the objective of this? Is to ensure that every deposit-taking institution upholds sound risk management practices in financial intermediation and contributes to the real economy. Also, the bank has instituted the requisite regulatory framework to push further the boundaries of financial innovation, supported by the unwavering commitment to digital finance and financial inclusion. Initiatives such as regulatory sandboxes, mobile money integration, and cross-border payment infrastructure are supporting the process to unlock access to finance for SMEs, startups, and underserved communities. Looking ahead, ladies and gentlemen, it is important to recognize that macroeconomic stability is a necessary condition, but not sufficient, to fully reset Ghana's economy. Stability strengthens the economic fundamentals, But structural transformation provides the direction for sustainable and inclusive growth. This implies that to fully reset Ghana's economy, we must broaden the growth model beyond the extractive sector. Undoubtedly, gold and cocoa are key drivers in the recovery process, but are limited in scope. We need to build on the extractive sector with value addition and diversification. What would we achieve by that? Long-term prosperity and employment generation. In so doing, we must leverage the African Continental Free Trade Area to position Ghana in a regional hub, as a regional hub for agro-processing, light manufacturing, and logistics, amongst others. These sectors have high employment elasticity and offer scalable export potential, but they need targeted policy support and infrastructure investment for us to be able to yield the necessary results from these areas. Other sectors such as tourism, education, and health must also be recognized for their economic potential in terms of job creation, foreign exchange earnings, and innovation. To unlock these potentials, we must confront deep structural challenges. What are some of these structural challenges? These include broadening domestic revenue mobilization through better tax compliance, efficiency, and fairness, implementation of performance-based budgeting, and strengthening public management frameworks to ensure value for money, and, most importantly, enhancing governance, transparency, and the rule of law to build a truly investors-friendly, competitive, and inclusive economy. In short, the economic reset agenda is not just about policy tools. Policy tools are important, but not sufficient. It is about policy consistency and institutional reforms. If we get these fundamentals right, ladies and gentlemen, Ghana can move from resilience to transformation. By way of conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, the journey ahead will not be easy, but it is filled with possibilities. The stable, sovereign, and globally competitive Ghana we seek to achieve requires resolve to stay the course of implementing difficult policy reforms. However, with courage and with integrity, this is achievable. In this direction, ladies and gentlemen, the Bank of Ghana remains committed to implementing prudent policies to reset the economy on the path of stability and growth. Let me once again thank the Graphic Communication Group and Ecobank Ghana for organizing this important forum. And to you participants, I say, let this forum be more than conversation with our distinguished panelists. Let it be a catalyst for national economic renewal rooted in truth, guided by data, and driven by collective action. Thank you for your attention.
Please, you can do better. That was a very insightful delivery. Thank you very much, Mr. Asai JC, for such a very powerful delivery. We appreciate your insights in this morning's conversation. With the floor being set, we'll be moving on to a very important aspect. But let me highlight some of the key things he mentioned. He touched on the development that the central bank have done so far in terms of ensuring there's fiscal prudence in management and regulation of the banking sector, and that should tell you that the commitment from the regulatory point of view is really getting stronger and better. And one thing businesses and financial sector doesn't like is unpredictability of policy decision. And with that being said, I'm sure henceforth the key commitments by the regulator will ensure both not just the players in the industry, but the customers feel secured, especially when it comes to investment decision. Many will not rather be looking for outside relatable investment portfolios, but we'll see that indeed we have a well-structured sometimes we tend to compare our financial sector to other development countries' financial sector, but we forget that they have had their challenges and have confronted them head on. It's high time for us to also confront our financial infrastructure and build it to suit our current economic dispensation, hoping that will build up to a very formidable one in the near future. Once again, help me applaud Mr. Osei Jesse. It's time for us to get into the next panel conversation. And I've known our key panelists for quite some time. I've met them several platforms, I've interacted with them for years, and I could tell you that it took a lot of planning by Graphic and Ecobank to bring these key experts who have written and been quoted in several articles and journals across the world. If you look at their work, every article they write in most universities and in most theses, doctoral researchers, they quote a lot of their works. And to tell you that this is not just a platform for mere conversation, but a platform that is based on hard issues that are geared towards policy direction. It sometimes boils on government to listen to the policy and the researchers so that it will make their work easier. Let the politics play their politics and let the researchers do their work. But most importantly, like Mr. Jesse said, collaboration is the way to go. Now, speaking about collaboration, help me welcome our main panelists for this morning's conversation. We are privileged to have with us this morning the advisor on economy at the Office of the President in the person of Honorable Seth Tekpe to join us this morning with a round of applause. Thank you so much, Mr. Tekpe. Wonderful. I've met Mr. Abekujan Kwanzaa on several platforms, and when he talks about tax policy and revenue mobilization, he sleeps it, he wakes up to it, and when he writes and speaks about it, everybody agrees before they give the opinion. So help me welcome Mr. Abekujan Kwanzaa, please. Thank you so much. We'll delve straight to the conversation shortly, but once again, please, a round of applause for my panelists. Okay, all right. I'd also like to welcome Professor Peter Korte to join us also, the panelists. Please. Awesome. Now that our chairs are filled, we'll move straight to the conversation. One thing, I'll welcome our questions and suggestions. If you have any interaction, we'll get to the Q&A question session where we'll be picking up every thought, opinion, and critique based on what you believe is the best way forward for Ghana, the mistakes we've done, the lessons we've learned, and the way forward as a nation. President John Mahama says it's resetting Ghana, but the key question is, the reset, does it begin with you or does it begin with the policy? Where should we begin from is the key question this morning. So once again, welcome my panelists. 1, 2. 1, 2. Okay, great. Now we'll go straight to the conversation. Now, first of all, begin with the advisor on economy. Mr. Seth Tekpe has over the years written a lot of articles, and when he talk about Ghana's financial tax system and structures, he has been one of the key proponents of them. First of all, I would like to take some few education about some of the key overview of Ghana's tax structure. What have we done so far, especially in building a formidable tax system for Ghana? Where have we fallen short, and where can we pick up from?
Yeah, thank you very much. And this whole workshop could be on this question. Permit me to state a short bit of history, and then I would look, ahead. Ghana was one of the countries that did deep tax reforms, organizational legislation, and administrative. In the 1980s and 1990s, during the Economic Recovery Program, Structural Adjustment Program, and what we did, let me mention three. There are many, several. First of all, we granted operational autonomy to our tax agencies. Some of you will recall the Customs Department and the Income Tax Department were taken out of the Civil Service and created as Internal Revenue Service and Customs, Excise, and Preventive Service. Later, we added the VAT service when the VAT was introduced. But this is a tax type structure. The second is we established the tax system, the structure, as you call it, on a very basic principle. There are 4 pillars of our tax system or structure that was redefined. Income tax, other personal, unlike the income tax and the VAT, it was selective in a sense that if you sinned in quotes, then you paid a sin tax, to a sin tax. So it was on alcohol, tobacco, and petroleum for pollution. So again, it's not entirely true that we've never had pollution tax. The petroleum was a key tax. And then there were taxes on luxury. If you enjoy a bit of luxury, your Benz, obviously by capacity or value, attracted a higher, rate of excise. So tobacco, alcohol, energy, these were the main bases. Then the final one was import duty, the final of the 4. Again, this is discriminatory and selective. And the name suggests, if you consume only domestically produced goods from the backyard or from wherever, you don't pay import duty because it's not imported. But if you go to the supermarket and buy the equivalent of an imported fruit or something, you pay, the import duty was paid at customs. Now this latter 2, which is the excise, import duty, and other import related, were collected by the customs, excise, and preventive service. This is a rationalization.
Okay.
Some of you will remember that we had super sales tax, we had so many, all of them were scrapped, and we had this rationalized regime.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Sedekbe, I'll come back to you briefly, but I also want to get an introductory comment from Mr. Kwanzaa. We understood from the onset, the finance minister has been quite vociferous about the outlook of our tax structure. He has, before he even placed or even pushed for his first budget, he kept mentioning removal of taxes. He kept highlighting the key issue about compliance. He kept giving the assurance that the GRA are going to be on the necks of businesses to ensure there's compliance from that angle, meeting targets, and all the necessary loopholes in our tax infrastructure. Based on that assessment, and also many have said our revenue targets are mostly overly ambitious. Why are we there, and how can we resolve that loophole in our tax structure?
All right, so thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. Winston, just before addressing your question, I would like to make some preliminary comments on the theme that we have today. And I would go along the theme that we have today, just to make sure that we carry everyone along. So today, we've been asked to talk about the broad review of Ghana's economy. The then, the now, and the way forward. Some of the questions that you've asked me borders on the then, the now, and the way forward. And to ensure that we get everybody along, to ensure that we have a dialogue, to ensure that it's indeed an economic forum, I don't want to lose my audience. So when I talk about the then, I'm talking about all periods prior to 2024, all right? When I talk about the now, I'm saying whatever has been done from January to now that we are sitting here. And then I would move on to address the issue of the way forward, which is from tomorrow to wherever we want to get to as a country. So anytime you hear me talking about the then, the now, let's put it in these categories in line with the theme for the conference. Now, addressing your question as to whether our budgets or our tax numbers are overly ambitious, several things would go in there. But the first thing I want to say is that before you say something is overly ambitious, you must either be doing an internal assessment relative to your capacity or look at what your peers are doing across. And for the purpose of our conversation, our peers here are other African countries. They are like us, similar economic structures. Where has Ghana fared with respect to the then when it comes to taxes? One of the recommended measures to check whether you are doing well enough in terms of tax mobilization is to look at what we call the tax to GDP. And let me break it down. Tax is tax, as we know. They could be defined in various ways. I won't bore my audience with what tax is, but whatever you think tax is, for the sake of this conversation, that is tax. All right? What is GDP? GDP is nothing but asking ourselves, how much did you have as income? How much did I have as income? Let's put all that together and we get our collective income. So one of the measures to determine whether we are doing well, whether it's overly ambitious or not, is to check what is our tax to GDP ratio. And what I can say is that when you look at the long-term trend, right from 2000, which falls into my den, till the end of 2022, and even by extension to 2024, the general recommended threshold is that if you want to say you are doing very well, without going into the definition of what tax is, then you should be doing a tax to GDP ratio of at least 15%. As a country, we have not been able to achieve that long-term trend of 15%. So I guess the natural question in the mind of my audience is, where are we? So if you look at data published by ETAF, if you look at the World Bank data, where are we is that on average, up to the end of 2024, we've been playing around 14%. Where is the average African peer? And once again, when I get into the world of averages, there are so many kinds of averages. But let's, whatever we think has been an average, guide us to continue that conversation. The African average sits at 16. So whilst Ghana is playing around 14, and you look at even the data for us, for 2023 and 2024, we're playing around 13, and here I'm talking about tax to GDP, the African average is 16. Now, coming back to internal, so I've just addressed the external bit of saying that whether it's overly ambitious or not. What my conclusion is that I don't think it's overly ambitious when you look at the external comparators. Now internal. Remember I said to determine whether it's overly ambitious or not, I need to look at my internal capacities. One of the ways I can measure my internal capacities is by looking at how I have performed historically. Historically, those who would say it's overly ambitious, they look at the data and say, yesterday I collected so much. Today I want to collect this amount. If they tell you it's overly ambitious, they are telling you that the growth that you are having, they don't think you've done anything new to be able to achieve that particular growth. So having established the various timelines I'm going to be drawing, having established the external comparators, having looked at the internal stuff, I believe that we have room to be able to achieve. Now on the minister's comments, in line with the president's instruction of taking away certain taxes here and there, we hold the view that taxes influences behavior. Let's not miss that fact. If, and I can see my senior colleague partner here, if tomorrow government of Ghana says taxes will be at 100% of my income, I'm out of PwC. I'm going to rest, probably get a farm somewhere and sleep, because taxes influence behaviors. What government is saying is that I'm going to be taking away some of these taxes, but to bridge the gap, I would bring in certain compliance measures. And as we go through, there are a couple of pointers I would raise in the bits of the way forward. So I hope this lays the foundation and helps my audience follow me as I go through this conversation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for Mr. Kwanzaa as well. I would like to bring Mr. Professor Peter Korte on this conversation. Over the years, I happen to be assessing most of the reports from ISA, and at the end of every report, one key aspect he never lets go is recommendations. Recommendations, and that is, I always assess the methodology and the recommendations, and you break down the key aspect. And I'd like to understand from him, based on the first 4 months or 5 months of this government's performance, what are some of the key highlights in terms of economic decision, and that you believe have been spectacular, and that you also believe some decisions may be risky for our economic outlook, although we are still under the IMF program?
Thank you very much, and good morning to you all. Let me thank the organizers, Ecobank Graphic Group, for inviting me this morning. Yes, I think there's been some highlight or pointers this year. We have seen some taxes being scrapped, which is good, because we, for instance, spoke a lot about e-levy, which we thought was a nuisance tax, if I may put it that way, because it's an affront on digital finance. And if we want to be cashless or moving towards cashless economy, I don't think we should be taxing such payments. The rate was punitive, so that I support very much, and I think that's a great idea. We've seen other taxes being removed. We saw betting tax, which I think is risky, because, and I know some of the young people will not agree with me, but I still stand my grounds, because you use tax to correct behavior. You also use tax to raise revenue and enhance people's livelihood. So if we were to channel this money into sports development, we were to channel betting tax into other sectors or training the young people to be gainfully employed, I think it will rather serve our purpose than to scrap it completely. So that's for me a risk area. Now, how do we plug the hole? I heard Abeku speak about our tax GDP ratio and then the discussion about whether we are being ambitious. Either you look at the real numbers in terms of real terms, so how much have you raised over time? Take out rate of inflation and see whether you are being ambitious or not. Or rather, look at your tax GDP, but that's how we compare across countries. And I don't think we are being ambitious. Rather, our tax levels are too high, in my view. Our VAT is 21% plus. Some are even straight levies that you cannot claim input tax and what have you. But look at our competitors. On average, some are paying 15%, 18%, and we are charging over 21%. So what you're doing is that you are encouraging people to evade. When your tax is too high, it calls for evasion. Sorry, tax evasion. So you are enriching customs officials, you are enriching businessmen, and government is struggling for money. We have an informal economy. Over 80% of our economy is informal. We have not devised a proper mechanism for taxing the informal sector. So all we do and what we are discussing is the 20%. Why should we focus so much on the 20% and overtax them and leave the 80%? So I think we need to look at this critically. Otherwise, we would not be making a lot of inroads in terms of tax revenue mobilization. And that is why we keep borrowing, because we are not raising enough revenue. Tax GDP at best 14%, when some are doing 18, 20, 23% within Africa. So it tells you there is a lot of risk inherent to risk. You know, maybe later we'll talk about even how we efficiently we even use the revenue, because it's not just about raising the revenue, but how well you use the revenue to advance your cause. Thank you.
Prof, before I let go of you, you mentioned about one of the key issues you highlighted consistently is the scrapping of the e-levy, which you describe as a nuisance tax. Would you say it was an opportunity based in terms of how that policy was rather implemented, or it was not a necessary burden previously? Like we mentioned, we needed to expand the tax net.
You know, at the time, the justification was that if we impose e-levy, we might not have to seek IMF, because there was a revenue gap, and we needed to shore up our revenue to minimize borrowing so that we do not have to resort to the IMF. So that was the, but I think the rate was just too high. It was punitive. We could have done a lower rate, at best 0.5%, and then tried to, I don't know what kind of simulation or study went into that tax rate. I struggle to understand. So I think it's a missed opportunity. Maybe a lower rate to see how much, because it could bring a lot of revenue though, despite the fact that it flies on the face of digital finance. But I don't think at that rate we were being economical. I don't think we were being rational. If we wanted to tax that sector, we could have done a lower rate or even expanded. When it started, my thinking was that we were expanding this to cover online transactions, online sales, etc. But there's a lot of revenue that could be taxed from that perspective. Unfortunately, we focus on mobile money and other electronic transfers. So I must say it's a missed opportunity. Maybe we need to revisit this, undertake a comprehensive study of whether we need to tax this or not to tax it. We had examples. GSMA did a study in 4 or 5 African countries where e-levy in different forms were introduced, and all those countries ended up scrapping it. So I don't know why we left that and still went ahead to impose e-levy.
Thank you very much, Prof. Please, a round of applause for him. Let me come to Honorable Tekbe. One thing I'm quite concerned is your focus on dealing with the budget deficit over the years, and looking at Ghana's consistent challenge in ensuring that we don't have that challenge on our budget and on our hands as a country in the face of growing our debt stock. Already we have obligations in servicing our Eurobonds and all those burdens on our heads. As an advisor to the government, what would you say is the strategy the government intends to implement going into the rest of the year amidst fulfilling a lot of the economic promises for both businesses and industries?
Yes, thank you very much. And if you permit me a little diversion just to, clarify, add to some of the contributions.
Sure.
I'm reading from His Excellency's speech, which he delivered at the CEO Forum. And he stated that in 2008, Ghana became a lower middle income country. That milestone was based on sound policy and institutional reform, and also the discovery of oil and the growing services sector, which he mentioned. Today, the opportunity exists for us to move further to become an upper middle income country. We will become an upper middle income country if we add a fourth, fifth, and probably sixth oil field, because the definition is your per capita income. Our GDP will increase divided by the population. And if the GDP increases faster, it means that we will shift into the next echelon with a diversified economy, resilient institutions, and a dynamic private sector. The point I'm making is that the figures which Abeku mentioned are average for 3 categories of African countries. We have only one high-income country, but we are split. Africa is not considered to be entirely low income by World Bank standards, and that's how we have been treated. Africa is split equally between middle-income countries, especially the lower middle-income countries, of which Ghana is one, and the low-income countries. The averages are for the low-income countries. For us to really manage our economy well, we must be doing tax to GDP ratios around 18 to 20%. And I mean tax to GDP ratio, no revenue to GDP ratio. In other words, markets move by sizes. If we want to be in the upper middle income country, or even now lower income, middle income country, we should do better than comparing ourselves to the low income countries, because the consequence is that we are losing concessional financing and grants. And that is what is taking us to the debt market. And to link it to your question, you can't go to the debt market, whether domestic or external, and then like you were doing with T-bills, because you had a lot of concessional financing, instead of paying down your debt, if you borrow, lend to pay, but instead of, you paid only interest only, the TB is interest only. Our sovereign bond was interest only. Our domestic bonds were interest only. And then you are rolling over the principal. And this awareness came in 2014, when with 3 years to go, we would have had to cough $750 million to pay the first sovereign bond, whilst we're adding other sovereign bonds. This is the rationale for going back to the Constitution and establishing the sinking fund, a debt repayment mechanism. We stopped, and the consequence, default, haircuts, and everything. In other words, Ghana is transforming, but its policies are not moving at pace. And the services sector overtook agric a long time ago. And yet, we tend to behave as if We are an agrarian economy. We are a service economy. Right? Of course, if we add value to agric, it would serve, our purpose. So, in linking your question, with the revenue, we need to generate more revenue to take care of recurrent expenditure, cover our recurrent expenditure or current expenditure, that is expenditure on a day-to-day basis, compensation, interest payments, and then what we call recurrent, and borrow only for capital. And make the projects pay for the loan. It shouldn't be on the taxpayer, which is the reason why in developing such infrastructure, as we have done or we did in the past, like the pipeline, the Chuabo plant, Terminal 3, port expansion, it is a revenue that used to go into consumption, either by the SOEs or by the government itself, that were ring-fenced because they were forex. And they are the ones that enabled us to borrow whilst we were in an IMF program. Because we had debt service reserve accounts, we curtailed consumption in order that we can build infrastructure. And the other was also, once you are able to borrow from the capital market and you have a mechanism for repayment. In fact, Ghana provided, apart from 200 million, it was Ghanaian resources that paid for the first sovereign bond, 550. We refinanced only 200. It means that it is feasible, it's possible. So why did we have to stop, a default? So it's the sustainability, of, policies that is lacking, right? I rationalized to e-levy. I started by rationalizing the tax regime way back in the ERP SAP era. What is e-levy? You see, at the time the VAT was introduced, VAT was on mainly goods. But we, even with foresight, had services tax that were being collected by IRS. And this was subsumed into the, VAT, right? So there's a VAT on services. So what is it? And I said that VAT is the largest consumption tax. If you spend, you pay. So what are we spending when we do, when we use electronics? You see, the problem with the e-levy is that it was taxing investments. It was taxing savings. Right? Because I've earned my income, I've paid PAYE on it already, I've paid the income tax. Right? Now the distinction is that, and let's take the whole electronic sector, and now we are going to electronic banking and all that. So I think there's a lesson to be learned.
Okay.
The consumption, I'm landing, the consumption is the fees that you are paying. Because if I get my income and I put it in my pocket, in my wallet, I don't have to pay any levy. But if I use services, somebody's services, to ATM, phones, and our phones are becoming the banks and the rest, right? Then the fees that are being charged, that is a consumption. And that is why when the VAT was revamped in 2013 with the assistance of experts and the rest, there was a VAT that was made explicit on non-core financial services, not on interest. Because your interest is sacrifice consumption, investment which you are put is savings. But once the bank charges you a fee, you have opted. And it's a good practice. I don't want to be misinterpreted. But you have opted for a service instead of keeping your money under your pillow, and others are at the risk of stealing. It is a fee that should attract the general consumption tax. Right? And so this is where we need a rationalization. And that's why I spoke about, the 4 pillars of our tax regime. Because any other tax is mimicking it, the 4. And unless you have a reason, and we had 2 reasons. Anytime we went into an IMF program, my last point, anytime we went into an IMF program, right, we imposed a national stabilization levy or a fiscal stabilization levy, but we made it a SPA. with the IMF program.
Okay.
And then we imposed temporary import duty. We made it expire. Otherwise, the temporary import duty will be an import duty too. And the fiscal stabilization levy, which is on the profits of financial sector and the rest, will be an income tax too. And that's why they must go. They are distorting, and they make it easy to administer and comply with the law.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Setek. A round of applause for him, please. There is more of this. There is more of this great insight in this yet to be launched book, which will be on the 25th of June 2025 at 4 p.m. Certainly the date will be announced later on. So the day is 25th. The book is going to be on VAT, value added tax, and I'm sure you can actually anticipate the key insight in this book, having gone through the system and understanding his wealth of knowledge in that area. I'd like you also to remind you that daily graphic business and other publications can be accessed on the Graphic News Plus app, which is also available on the App Store, Google Play Store, and your web browser. If you have your smartphone here, you can go on App Store and download the Graphic News Plus app. Instead of, this is going digital, by the way, so you can download all the news publications right on your mobile handle. Every morning you receive your update right on your handset. I'd like you to know that you are still listening to us on Joy 99.7 FM. We are still at a daily graphic Ecobank Economic Forum, where we are discussing the broad review of the economy then, now, and the way forward. I will come to you, our audience, and also our viewers online who are watching us, listening to us as well. We'll take your questions from having listened to my panelists this morning. I'm sure you have some insights, you have some suggestions, you have some questions or critique of some new policies or decisions that may not necessarily help or are helping, or probably some caution in terms of how they are being implemented. So if you have any question, you may show your hand and I'll come to you briefly. But indeed, before I even come to you, let me just take some few insight from Mr. Beku Kansap. When it comes to the key aspect, that is tax, I always talk about the issue about exemption policy of Ghana. It becomes a very topical issue when you see some companies being exempted, and it becomes a political overhaul conversation. But what would you say is the right approach to handle policy decision in terms of exemption to ensure there's the tendency for equity in appliance?
All right, so thank you very much, Winston. And once again, what I will do is to still keep my eye on the theme, and then address your question. So just by way of a quick reminder, my then ends at 2024.
Okay.
My now ends today. And my way forward starts tomorrow. I want to bring this home so that you and I feel this. This year, our plan, if everything goes on course and does not change, is that on average, the government of Ghana is expecting you to contribute an amount of 540 cedis per month. You can do the maths, multiply by a population of about 34 million people, and it will give you a fair idea of the revenue. In terms of expenses per month, to pay our public officials, to pay for our doctors, to pay our nurses, our policemen who guide us when we are going home, etc., we expect to spend an amount of 680 Ghana cedis on average per month. Now, to address your question on the exemptions, if certain exemptions were not planned for and we end up granting that exemption, remember I said that taxes have consequences, so we may be granting those exemptions so that certain things that we couldn't have done would have done them. Businesses that may not have invested would have allowed them to invest, but more often than not, we may not get a dividend just in the first year. Meaning that the 540 Ghana cedis per month we all have to pay, on average, may drop. And if that drops, government may not meet its revenue targets, and consequently, government may not be able to achieve its expenditure plans. Having put that as a background, we in this country were complaining that government gives out too much exemptions. So in 2012, we decided to go to Parliament. Parliament passed an Exemptions Act to say that I will be guided by this going forward. The Commissioner General of the GRA ought to report to the Minister of Finance to tell them how much the exemptions for a particular period have been. People who have exemptions ought to go and report themselves, etc., etc. One of the provisions which I thought Parliament did and did very well, and my expectation is that looking at the trends of how things have gone in this country, with the president starting with a national economic dialogue to set the pace for us to have a conversation, let us hold those you and I stand in the sun to vote for accountable. What am I saying here? When the law was passed, one of the introductions that we introduced was that we as a people can decide to say that, Winston, you are telling us you cannot do this without we giving you an exemption. Not a problem at all. We will monetize that exemption and have an interest in your business. Where I sit now, pending additional information, I thought that was an innovative stuff. Because if you say you cannot carry out a particular stuff, so you need the state to have their skin in the game, then the state is also saying that if your business is valued X, give me a portion of the X. And whenever you think you do not need me any longer, come and then buy back that. I am hoping that those who stood in the sun to vote for on the 7th of December, when certain exemptions come to them, they would ensure that this provision of law is passed. And why it matters a lot to me is that, look, we keep hearing how much people get to pay to get bills passed and all those stuff. If the laws are passed and we do not ensure the laws work, it's actually at a loss to you and I. So if you see the next exemption going to Parliament, let's all be very interested to find out why the state on this particular account is departing and not taking an interest. If we've gotten to that stage where we feel as a people that we don't need that provision of the law any longer, we can go ahead and repeal it. But until then, let's monitor our parliamentarians, call them, and find out why they are departing from the law they themselves passed about 3 years ago. So those would be my comments on the exemptions question.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter. I say, Mr. Bego Kansa. Now, I'd like to take your brief remarks, your questions. It's not time for Q&A before I get Professor Peter into the conversation. So, if you have any question, you can kindly show by hand. I'll come to you personally with the microphone.
Thank you very much.
Yes,
my name is Eric Amponsa-Boatin. In the discourse that we are having, none of them raised the issue about corruption. But we know that it is something that affects us. Let's even just take one. We hear financial loss to the state. Financial loss to the state. And the amounts involved are huge. So the next time round, I would want us to also probably get somebody to talk about that and how we'll be able to handle that. Now, my friend, the advisor, okay, we were having a chat. And one of the things that I said to him was that if we are going to pay VAT, why should we put the VAT after we have added the levies? Because you cannot claim that as an input. So what happens is that it becomes an additional, it's actually a cost. And so if somebody wants to invest here in Ghana, and like my other friend said, there are other countries who are close to us, so they will go there. So I want to ask him, is he going to advise the government to let us go back to the times when we had the VAT on the price of the commodity? I also want to draw his attention. When you look at IAS 40, and we're looking at investment properties, you realize that you pay the growth and the levy based on the net profit before tax. We are having a situation whereby, because of the fact that you want to use or adopt IAS 40, the net profit before tax is huge, very huge figure. Meanwhile, the asset has not become realized. And yet, so I also want him to look at that. This one is probably, please, the last one.
Okay, so thank you very much. I think because of time, we are managing time, so we'll come back to you briefly.
All right, okay.
Yes, please. Thank you so much. We have 2 questions being said. Let's take some few questions as well.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. My name is Dr. Bright Mauda, Wisconsin International University College. Thank you, panelists, for your brilliant presentations. I have my first question. Unfortunately, the gentleman from the Bank of Ghana has left. He gave us a very good statistics as to the performance of the economy for the last 5 months, but he failed to give us something about sustainability, going the way forward for the next 2 or 3 years. But I have one question for the Honorable Setekwe, the former Minister for Finance. What role can fiscal policy play in promoting private sector development and attracting foreign investment? From the presentation from the tax experts, we have not been able to achieve the 22% tax revenue. And we've also not been able to match our peers. We are at 14%, which means that there are some inefficiencies in the system.
Okay.
And so also to him, what strategies can the government put in place to improve tax compliance, reduce tax evasion, and increase revenue mobilization? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doc. We appreciate your question. We'll take this key. Okay, let's take one last one, and I'll get my panelists to respond to all your questions. Your name and your question, please.
Thank you. My name is Edmond Awaiti. My question goes to Mr. Setekwe. In your presentation, you mentioned that agric play a critical role in expansion of our economy. We've consistently realized that we are not adding value to the agricultural product before export. What has consistently been the factors that have been responsible for our inability to add values to our agric product before export? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll come back to you, our audience, briefly. Let me get the insight on your responses briefly. Mr. Setekwe, the initial one, which was on the aspect of VAT being additional cost on product, if I'm getting you right, and also the IRS 40, which he made mention of as one of the key challenges in the tax structure.
Let me explain this in a very practical way. If you go to a hotel, for example, and I'm using restaurants and hotels because they are the front end. You are the consumer. You are the one bearing the tax eventually. Whether the food on which the VAT is put Okay, rather let me say the VAT on which you have to pay, the VAT you will be charged after you have eaten. In all probability, and I take that high-end hotels would have imported, elements, and it will have domestic elements, including the services the hotel is rendering to you for a room, if you are residents and all that. The long and short is, some goods are bought with VAT paid prior, right? Because VAT, is on value added. So at any point somebody adds a value, the importer brings the goods, pays VAT at the port, the wholesaler buys it, the wholesaler when he sells, pays VAT or charges VAT and adds, unless the VAT paid at the port is set aside. As far as they are concerned, is cost. They will have added it to their warehouse cost before they charge you the VAT, because it's cost. Now, the VAT are those two stages: imports, wholesale, unless something is done to relieve it. As far as the business at the retail end, supermarket is concerned, or the hotel I'm using is concerned, their cost, unless something is done, right? And that is why under the VAT regime we have, if you are registered, right, if you are registered, you put what you paid at the port aside, you don't add it to your cost, because when you sell and you add cost which excludes the VAT, and you charge the VAT, let's say 100 is brought in, you add 20, and let's simplify it, the VAT is 10%, you would have paid, or the importer would have paid 100 times, 10% to GRA. Now, if there was no provision for you, you would add the 10 to the 100, and it will be 110. And then you will add your 20, which is your value added, right, to, before charging the VAT. Now, if it was not relieved, the VAT you charge will be on 130. 100 plus the 10, making it 100 and plus your 20, 130. So the VAT you will charge will be 13. If, however, we recognize that the 120, that is your 100 plus the 20, right? That 100, there is a 10 that was paid to GRA already. Then you would not add it, you would exclude, you would deduct, you add 20 to the 100 times 10, and it's 12, no longer 13. The VAT difference, what you charge will be 12. You are not adding the 10, so it becomes 12. And this is what we call the input tax credits. So the problem we are having with all the levies is that a levy is not like VAT. You don't take a credit for what you paid. And so the rational businessman will add the levy they paid, right? But when do you know that a levy was paid or not paid? You wouldn't know, as far as you are concerned. So we just keep adding it. And that is why, because you are not in a position to do that, that is why all the levies will have to be added. So not that you cannot get the credit, they will be added. And that was the problem that we had. You remember the counting that took place. So many levies, all of them going in. Remember what I said from the beginning. When the VAT was rationalized, it was replaced with one regime, which is the VAT. And if you are registered, you get a credit for the VAT, right? So if you remove national health insurance, which was being collected like a VAT, and you remove the Get Fund, which was being collected like a VAT, right? And you were getting credit, and you make it a levy, the same tax for which you were getting a credit will now go into the VAT base as a cost. This was the problem that we were having. And so you have evasion and avoidance. So going forward, when you are doing tax reform, you do it gingerly, because if you are not careful, you also erode the tax base. So the levies that were removed is phase one. As somebody said, there's a VAT study that has been done, all of them. And so in the mid-year review, and in the budget and going forward, some of the levies, more levies will have to be removed, just as we did pre-Kumi-Preku, post-Kumi-Preku. We are only going back and reintroducing the tax regime that we had, before the VAT was introduced. We only have to clean it and make it neat so that businesses stop adding the levies, all the number of levies. If there's a reason, as I said, there were two: temporary import duty, and the national stabilization levy, and hopefully we would establish a stabilization fund, to stabilize the economy. As he said, now that the times are good, let's put some money aside, because we don't control commodity prices. We don't, and they may go against us. The world may go against us. We are not in control of all the factors. So now that is good, and this is why, he said, this is why the governor has said, the minister has said it, that we are bringing back two things. One, when the times are good, some stabilization money should be kept to stabilize. It was introduced already. Two, if you borrow, learn to pay. Let's bring back the debt repayment mechanism. We went HIPIC. We've defaulted. I don't think we need a third reason, to keep the debt repayment account. I think we've had enough reason to put some money aside to pay the debt.
Thank you very much. So, Mr. Tekwe, before there was one question on compliance, which I would like to get Mr. Abeku to touch on briefly, on improving compliance.
Thank you very much, Winston. And once again, as usual, that's what I'm going to be doing. Yeah. I don't want to lose anybody.
Briefly, because of time. Yeah.
So my periods have been drawn up already. I've reminded us on average how much each of us will have to pay and how much will be spent on us. To address the question that I guess the professor asked on what to do to bridge the gap, when I got an invitation to be on this panel, I started thinking, what have I said somewhere before that I think it would readily work? Then I remembered that in 2018, for the 2019 budget, and that's available online, as PwC, we did make a proposal for a resetting of the system as far back as in 2019.
So you predicted the reset?
No, so I needed to clarify. So the question is, how did we define reset? And that's why I've said it's publicly available.
Okay.
And then in 2020, Graphic also invited me to a platform where we spoke and we said, we believe reset should be this. So I don't know whether the current president and his team took it from there, and if Honorable is here, if he took it from there, probably we need to earn some royalties for that. So now, going through, how did we define reset then, to address his question? And I'll only spell out how we define reset, and how other questions come up, then I may address them a lot fuller. We said the first thing that we need to do to improve on compliance is a reassurance of the government to the people of Ghana. The people of Ghana keep telling you something loudly. We do not see value for our money, so we are not going to pay the tax. They keep telling you, just go to the market, they will tell you. So we called the first R a reassurance to the people of Ghana that indeed when we pay, because taxes are prices for public goods, let's not forget. So the natural question you keep asking yourself is that, am I paying too much for the good I want, or am I paying too little? And then we can have a conversation. The second way we spelled the reset, the E, was educate. We were in this country when a certain minister responsible for tourism said that celebrities were not paying tax because they don't understand the system. Our point at that time was take away the excuse by educating them so that now they can understand. The third point was simplify. Without boring this audience, I have always said publicly, I don't think the calculation of the inclusion of the levies are correct, even based on the laws of Ghana. But I'm going to spare the audience the technical and leave away my technical hat. The next E was enforcement, and we added closely to that monitoring. And if I get opportunity to address, I would address why the issue of enforcement is very relevant. Because in a developing economy like Ghana, In an economy where we say we are highly informal, one of my partners say, no, let's stop calling it informal. This is the Ghanaian economy. The economy we grew up knowing was the corner shop. The economy we grew up knowing was Mokola. So let's stop the informal economy. The moment we classify it as an informal economy, we do not focus that. And when I get a chance, I would address it a bit more. And the last one is all about trust. It's all about trust. So Winston, when I get a next round of opportunity to address this, I would then elaborate very well on what we need to do. If I go with Honorable's projection that what should work for us is 18, or even my conservative that let's beat the average of 16, I will explain why we believe that the way we spell the RESET, which is reassure the people, educate the people, simplify the system, enforce, and lastly, build trust, would help us close the gap. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Last question, which I had amongst the audience, has to do with value addition. We have been extractive sector dependent in our economy. Many are quite anticipating that should there be any economic shocks, we are likely to fall back to where we were previously. Professor Peter Kote, I would like to get your thoughts on that. Diversification of our economy as a way to go from your angle. Value addition is a way to be?
Yes, certainly the way to go. At the moment, if you look at our export earnings,
yes,
gold accounts for about 50%. And now we are pushing gold board and other things. So it's like we are focusing on the easy ones, but leaving the other critical sectors. Agric, our food production, non-traditional exports. You know, we need to support the value chain and ensure that we cut down on imports and also be resilient, because when there is any shock, assuming gold prices start tumbling, like it happened to cocoa some time ago, or some of our commodity prices, it happened to oil. Nigeria's economy became, basically stable. Unstable, because oil prices started coming down drastically. So we need to learn from this and diversify as much as we can. But before I end, I think there are one or two points I want to raise about the issue about corruption. I think when I started, I spoke about efficiency, value for money in our spending. We did a study of 41 African countries, trying to look at the efficiency of public sector spending, and noticed that for every 100 cedis we spend in investment, 39 cedis goes wasted. Ghana ranked 26 out of the 41. So we are wasting 39 cedis out of every 100 cedis we spent in the health sector. I need to be specific. So it tells you that we are not adding or having value for money. We are not spending efficiently, and we need to work on that. Lastly, Honorable Secretary, I'm happy we are paired for the second time this week on a panel. This, I keep hearing, I heard the President speak about going to the capital market, and I think it's something that we've been hearing lately. Let's tread cautiously, because at the moment, our rating is CCC+. When you are at that level, you are still very risky, so the interest payment is going to be very high, very punitive. If you are not careful, we'll accumulate debt again, and then we'll get a haircut or hair shave or whatever again. So please, let's be cautious. You see, we speak about getting the SOEs and others who have the financial muscle to borrow. But let's also note that when they borrow and they fail, the sovereignty of the nation kicks in. There's a sovereign guarantee, and therefore it becomes a national debt. We've had a very good example. When I see the Terminal 3, anytime I see Terminal 3, I remember you for championing this and all the good work you did. But it's not all the SOEs that will be as successful as we think. So it's good to go, but let's be very, very careful as we open up to the capital market. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for my panelists. I'll take the final round of questioning or opinion. Please make it brief, one question at a time. I see one hand at the back. Can he get the microphone before I come to one? Yes, one at the back. Yes. He's been lifting his hand for quite some time now. Then I'll take
Thank
two
you
more.
So much. My name is Suleiman Mustafa. I edit the graphic business.
Okay.
The team, broad review of the economy of Ghana. I want to move away from tax and compliance and what have you to ask a question on inflation. We have a medium-term target of 8 plus or minus 2%. A medium-term target of inflation, 8 plus or minus 2. And considering the fact that the Bank of Ghana has for over 2 decades been implementing the inflation targeting regime, and yet we've not been able to attain our medium-term inflation target. What is the problem? Why for a very long time we've not been able to attain our medium-term inflation target of 8 plus or minus 2%? Is it the inflation targeting regime that is a problem, that we have to rethink it, or is the workhorse that has to be rethinked? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me take. Okay, sir. Okay, I think the gentleman. We need more ladies because I always favor the ladies in this.
Thank you very much,
yes, sir.
Mr. Moderator. My name is Kofi Lucas.
Yes, sir.
From Critical Strategic Thinkers Network. We have a long way to go as a nation. And when Honorable was making his presentation, he did mention that we are losing some grants. Yet there's another way, a strategy or tactics to way to get grants. And we can get grants over $1 billion every year if we think strategically and tactically. Now, the issue is, how do we approach it? What do we value? Take our educational institution, TVET. Have we thought of TVET? That TVET can solve 90% of our problems in this country. And are we giving them the needed collaboration and support? Look at where we are. Can we say that is it the handiwork of the TVET or the grammar people? Look at the environment. The area here, TVET all over. Is it the grammar people or the TVET? So why don't we place premium on TVET?
Okay.
And with TVET, if we think strategically and tactically, we should be able to attract grant over 1 billion Ghana cedis every year. Let us make use of strategic thinkers in this country, and I'm sure God will help us to achieve that.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lucas. Let's take one final question. Okay, I see this gentleman behind you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I am Franklin Ouswa-Safoje, a retiree and an adjunct lecturer at University of Ghana Business School. Thank you. Talking about revenue mobilization and the cost efficiency, I think the issue of cost to the government has to do with corruption. Revenue also, in some respect, deals with corruption. I would like to know whether we have this back duty investigation scheme here in Ghana, where one's lifestyle is reconciled with one's known and declared income. In that case, those politicians and other office holders whose activities, corruption, lead to an upscale of the cost of capital, capital expenditure, that is road construction and the rest, they will be subjected to back duty investigations upon leaving office, in which case they will have to prepare capital statement for each year of their service or their tenure, which will then reveal how did you come by this money, because your known and declared income is say 100,000 Ghanaian cedis a year. Meanwhile, you are able to afford something about 500,000 Ghanaian cedis a year. How did you come by the difference of 400,000? If it was a gift, did you pay gift tax? Then it means if it was a gift, then tax evasion. And there is no free lunch anywhere. So you cannot tell me that somebody gave you a gift. Gift for what? So these issues, if they are not in our tax laws, they must be addressed. Because of time constraint, we're not going too much into it. But let me give you one example.
Briefly,
which
please.
Occurred in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
Lester Piggott. In 1987, he was sentenced by the Ipswich Crown Court to a prison term of 3 years after backdating investigations, because it was detected that he had evaded tax to the tune of over £3 million sterling. And he had to, one, pay the tax, that is restitution to the state. 2, interest, because you were not paying your taxes, the government has to go and borrow money, and the government was paying interest. You have to pay the interest. Then penalty. The penalty is the punishment, and also prison term, because tax evasion is a criminal offense. We must deal with all these issues, and the issue of mobilization of revenue and the cost inflation, I believe, would be minimized. I wouldn't say totally go, but it will be minimized.
All right. Thank you very much. A round of applause for that. Let me lastly ask Mr. Tekpe, since he is amongst all of the panelists, he is in government, and that has to do with, he made mention of the governments will reduce or rationalize more taxes. I just want to know which tax angles should we be looking forward to in the 2020, the mid-year budget possibly, and also what should businesses be expecting? Because businesses will plan with information and anticipation towards the rest of the year. Already, whatever has to be done in the first quarter has been done. Now they are anticipating the mid-year budget before they restructure or start putting up some of their strategies.
Yeah, thank you very much. It takes 1.5 to 2 years to do a major fiscal reform. And so that's why I was careful in saying that it will begin, with a mid-year review, going to next year's budget, because you also don't want to be losing revenue as you are doing it. But in the tax area, the two things, we do not have a domestic tax system. What we have is a custom system which works fairly well. And since the merger of IRS and VAT to create a domestic tax department, the VAT service used to have a system for only VAT. Then IRS was on the verge of replacing its mainframes and others. And since then, we have not. And so to illustrate, we were talking about VAT, since we've been talking about it. The first VAT on foreign transactions is collected by customs. And it's on the customs entry. But we don't call it a VAT invoice. And many businesses that claim credit and refunds are using, that data and statistics to claim the refund. And if you do not have a domestic tax system, what we call ITAS, which was to follow the ICOMS or West Blue, there's no way the tax administration, given the volumes of transaction, the domestic tax division can cope with compliance by comparing what is, going on at the port. So ITAS is a very important priority, for the government. The Minister for Finance mentioned. That is the domestic taxes, all those we've been talking about, from income tax to the don'ts. So if you are developing an app, my favorite example, for a restaurant or for others, for a domestic tax system, the data which, the one developing the app, the vendor, is collecting, is sitting on their database. It's not going into a domestic tax system. In order that GRA will be able to compare it, with the VAT, because the restaurant would have imported furniture, they would have imported so many things and they are claiming credit. Right. So that is priority number one. I think when it comes to corruption and also dealing with taxpayers fairly, the Independent Tax Appeals Board, which sits between the courts and the Commissioner General's powers exercise, it needs to kick in. It relieves the cost of sending too many cases, to the courts. It's also more simplified because tax appeals boards or tribunals are structured such that, if you bring somebody, from a village for evasion of, he can use local language, an interpreter. He doesn't have to engage a lawyer. He can speak for him or herself, or get somebody who is lower down, below the accounting firms and the others to go and talk about what he's doing. So those are some significant initiatives that will have to be implementing. Since the Bank of Ghana gentleman left, I mentioned already, to sustain inflation, to sustain reserves, to sustain the exchange rate, we need to rebuild the buffers, right? If you do not have sufficient, buffers, you are not putting money down, gradually as the times are good, targeting your debt, targeting the time when we'll be out of the rainy season. The food index, accounts for very significantly going to the dry season. Importation until we are able to do the farmer services companies and the rest, to store goods and the rest, your reserves will go down. And time will come for you to pay the debt. If you are not putting, all this will be depleting the reserves. And these are the things which, were envisaged, and the oil revenue in particular was, to address issues which we were not addressing in the past because they were new to the budget. And so the stabilization fund, the contingency fund and all those things, economists here, they are counter-cyclical, measures. That's a simple explanation for them. Because Saudi Arabia will stop pumping a lot of oil into, and prices with the midterm elections and others coming, the U.S. might reverse, and some of the external factors which I think the panelists were mentioning, and I think he hinted at it, we'll have to protect ourselves against those shocks, so that we'll then be able to maintain, Prof, I've heard you before on being careful in going to the capital markets. The point also is that it's very expensive borrowing and using treasury bills at those high rates to build capital, to do investments, right? And so for as long as, and that is why the other point is that we know, I don't know if there's somebody in the pension funds, they are holding funds. They put them, pension funds are for long-term investments. And they were putting them into the 3-year and 5-year bonds, and we're even pushing 7-year, 10-year domestic bonds. The discipline is, as I said, Prof, if we are going to reintroduce, we must introduce a debt repayment mechanism. I can't say it, more than, and that is the care that is required. And the thinking, which has been said already by HE, so I can mention, is why don't we also have a debt ceiling for ourselves? So we say that our debt, we will allow our debt to GDP ratio to exceed 60%, at most 65%. And if it falls, fine, but because we have developments, we can say that we will not let it fall below 45, 50%. So a ceiling and a floor. And once you've been able to bring them in, then what you are managing is actually the margin. Once it gets out of 60%, you prepare to repay them from the sinking fund and the rest before it is 65 and it goes to 70% and you default. Right, so yes, sound debt management policies will have to accompany going back, into, I don't want to repeat myself. Remember that we use $550 million US within a matter of 3 years to pay the first sovereign bond of $750 million. And that was when the oil prices were going up. We built, those reserves. In fact, the 200 million, 350, approximately 200, was used by the previous administration to extinguish, the liability. Otherwise, that first sovereign bond would have added to our woes. It means that it's feasible. It was feasible with one oil field. It should be feasible with 3, 4, and 5. And that is the reason why the oil revenue is viewed. Now, there is other minerals like lithium and the rest. Let us not continue, behaving, as it is. Households do it. I mean, you keep part of the bonus. Your son will go and play and have a cough. They will go and play football, hurt themselves, and all that. So we should, as a nation, behave. Government should behave like households and businesses.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panelists. It's been deep depth conversation this morning, insightful contributions from not just my panelists, but from you, and also the viewers online, those listening to us on Joy 99.7 FM, those watching us online on graphiconline.com and all our various platforms. I would like to remind you that you can have access to day-to-day news bulletins information from the Graphic News Plus app, which is available on App Store, Google Play Store, and your web browser. You can access it right now. If you have a mobile phone, go to Play Store or App Store and download the Graphic News Plus. If you are comfortable with reading consistently on your phone instead of having hard copies, you can still download and subscribe. Quite easy. I would like to also acknowledge our partners, Ecobank Graphic, and also every key player who has made time to be here this morning. I know I want to take final remarks from the last, before we go. We've had insightful time this morning. So I'll like Mr. Abeku Kansa, let me take your final remark, and also Professor Peter Korte as well.
All right, so thank you very much, Winston. And by way of final remark, I would say that let the laws that we pass work. So, Eric, you raised the issue on corruption. We already have laws that tries to sanitize the tax system. The laws, I guess, were passed even when Honorable was the finance minister. And what does that law say? That law says that just as you cannot just get anybody going before our courts to go and represent people on legal matters unless they choose to represent themselves, the tax law also says that you cannot go and take anybody to just go and represent you to deal with tax matters. Take people that are properly trained to do that. What am I driving at? It is sometimes very difficult to establish corruption because you get into the world of criminality, and we know that the standards of proving crime are quite high, but the bars for ethics are a bit lower. These institutes already have bodies responsible for discipline. So if somebody believes that somebody has not done their work well, somebody was corrupt, and you cannot establish it using the criminal threshold, you can go and report them to their institutes. Where do we sit since this law was passed 9 years ago? Next year we'll cut a cake to celebrate that law. It will be 10 years old. As at now, the revenue still deals with people who cannot demonstrate that they have been properly trained to handle tax matters. So by way of final comment, I just hope that government will take the lead. GRA will commit. I remember the last tax conference, these issues came up. GRA will actually commit that going forward, if somebody says, quote unquote, I'm a guru person dealing in tax matters, you would ask, are you certified? If you believe the person has been dealing with corrupt matters, report the person to the institutes. Investigations will be carried out, and if properly established, you get those out. And over time, at least in the tax space, we should be able to deal with corruption largely. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Professor Peter Korte.
Well, my final comment will be, let's look at the tax reforms that have been proposed. I think in the budget, some were scrapped, others are yet to be handled. Let's look at that carefully. Our VAT rate is too high by African standard, and I think we need to revise. So in order to make compliance easy, I've spoken about the efficiency issue. because people want to see what their monies are being used for rather than being wasted. So let's work on that carefully. Finally, a gentleman spoke about inflation targeting and the fact that we are not meeting our targets all the time. Yes, it's true, but I must also say that the inflation targeting regime has yielded better results than the period that we were not engaged in inflation targeting. So it is a good policy that we need to promote. However, the monetary authorities should be speaking with the fiscal authorities. In most cases, they are not speaking together. They are not basically engaged in the conversation. So you see Bank of Ghana trying to fight inflation, increasing the policy rates, and businesses are crying. Then you see the fiscal authorities spending, sometimes not on productive areas, at times just to win elections, populist programs, etc. So I would want fiscal and monetary coordination to continue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A round of applause for our panelists. We would like to do a brief photo shoot. I would like to have my panelists stand in front. I would like to also welcome Mr. Ato to join us to take a brief photo session before we get to any other development. Please, you can a round of applause for my panelists. Thank you. We're happy to quote a Honorable Setekpe. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Mr. Beko Kwanzaa, thank you so much. We've had a very insightful conversation this morning. This is just the maiden edition. Expect more deep conversation going forward from Ecobank and Graphic. Henceforth, we'll be inviting you in subsequent conversation. And this time round, we'll be ensuring that the conversation are essential for promoting, informing, and advising policy direction in our various industries that we play or pry in. I would like to, first of all, thank you also for making time in your busy schedule to be here. We're looking forward for more collaborations subsequently. And end of the program. My name is Winston Taki. I'm a broadcast journalist with Multimedia Group, a business analyst, and I look forward for more network with you and your organization. Then we can work together to push the Ghana agenda forward. Thanks for coming. Have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye. You can network whilst you can as well.
It's source of power, adding to your options, knowing that quality and standard remains intact, and our content, which is accepted as truth and accuracy every day, is accessible on the go. Access your favorite daily graphic and our weeklies, The Mirror, Graphic Business, Graphic Showbiz, Junior Graphic, and Graphic Sports on Graphic News Plus app. It's the digital replicas of our work. Download Graphic News Plus app on the Google Play Store, Apple App Store, and available on www.graphicnewsplus.com as you remain abreast of and keep pace with on-the-minute news updates on the go. Home sweet home. Welcome family and friends. Choose the bundle that best works for you from as low as 10 Ghana cedis weekly for unlimited access to all publications. Graphic, truth and accuracy every day. Information is a great source of power, adding to your options, knowing that quality and standard remains intact, and our content, which is accepted as truth and accuracy every day, is accessible on the go. Access your favorite daily graphic and our weeklies, The Mirror, Graphic Business, Graphic Showbiz, Junior Graphic, and Graphic Sports on Graphic News Plus app. It's the digital replicas of our work. Download Graphic News Plus app on the Google Play Store, Apple App Store, and available on www.graphicnewsplus.com as you remain abreast of and keep pace with on-the-minute news updates on the go. Home sweet home. Welcome family and friends. Choose the bundle that best works for you from as low as 10 Ghana cedis weekly for unlimited access to all publications. Graphic, truth and accuracy every day. Information is a great source of power, adding to your options, knowing that quality and standard remains intact, and our content, which is accepted as truth and accuracy every day, is accessible on the go. Access your favorite daily graphic and our weeklies The Mirror, Graphic Business, Graphic Showbiz, Junior Graphic, and Graphic Sports on Graphic News Plus app. It's the digital replicas of our work. Download Graphic News Plus app on the Google Play Store, Apple App Store, and available on www.graphicnewsplus.com as you remain abreast of and keep pace with on-the-minute news updates on the go. Home sweet home. Welcome family and friends. Choose the bundle that best works for you from as low as 10 Ghana cedis weekly for unlimited access to all publications. Graphic, truth and accuracy every day. Information is a great source of